Hi everyone. Welcome to this book release, my third book in the last 3 years. Thanks for joining us for this amazing event. I'm not going to talk much because I think my book will do whatever speaking it has to do. I didn't write the poems. Poems came to me in the middle of the night. You have watched my video, hopefully. If not, the link is there in the invite. I'm just going to send it back to Isha and get her started. Over to you, Isha.
Thanks, Baba. Welcome, everybody. So excited to welcome you to the launch of Imagination and Consciousness. My name is Isha Dandavate. I'm a user experience researcher at Google, and I'm also Uday's daughter. I'm honored to MC the Baba's third book launch in 3 years. Today we have 11 speakers from diverse backgrounds to give us their perspectives and reflections on this book. All right, well then we will go to Deane Richardson, who will officially release the book. Deane is the co-founder of RichardsonSmith, which later became Fitch plus Richardson-Smith. He's been active in the global design community, especially in the International Council of Societies of Industrial Design, which is now known as the World Design Organization. Deane, can I invite you to please unmute and release this book?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Uday, and Tim, if he gets there, and the session participants that you have hosted today, and all the Zoom attendees. From the Rocky Mountain foothills over Denver, Colorado, it is an honor for me to help introduce Uday's latest book. First, I would like to thank Uday for his insights on creative thinking in his new book, Imagination and Consciousness. What an unexpected gift from our pandemic isolation. And I have studied it from front to back and back to front. First, I would like to thank Uday for his insights on creative thinking in his new book, Imagination and Consciousness. His positive expressions are critical to our thinking and doing, who we are, and hope to become in this age of complex challenges and opportunities, and how we as individuals can contribute. For me as a designer, researcher, and innovator, Uday clarifies the role of creative thinkers and doers, and brings both forth priorities and goals to be considered. However, it seems it helps to understand the book's purpose as he defines consciousness on page 9 as a state of awareness where we see without our eyes, where we know without thinking, and spread our wings and reach out in stillness. And it helps when he defines imagination also as a state of transcending reality, where we see without our eyes, feel without our stimuli, and fly without wings. He concludes that imagination and consciousness brings us freedom from doubt, judgment, and logic. I suddenly realized this book will take my concentrated focus. It is a simple design, clean and clear. Perhaps it may become a designer's tool when searching for their own human experiences. Thank you, Chung Ho, Savannah Quorum, and Molly Pearson for giving it form and clarity. Its 179 pages are a bit like a Mozart symphony, full of variations, somewhat adventurous and contemplative. It has many parts that are important to design and innovators, as well as all the creative arts, music, writing, painting, etc. And then on page 10 and 11, he refers to creative thinkers and doers as brave hearts, all one word. And he is right. It takes boldness of imagination to find what does not currently exist. I quote this book from his book: imaginative people are brave. They are kind. Their dreams are shaped by their compassion and a desire to change the world for better. But then he says, brave hearts need boundaries, as outlined on pages 12 and 13. I quote, "We designers must define boundaries to our desires. We must cultivate mindfulness and define a space for kinship and coexistence." Then on page 13, I quote, "I assume that is where consciousness becomes critical to imagination." And then on page 120, titled "Design is," he defines design as an act of imagining possibilities. It is an act with empathy, bringing imagination to life with purpose. The act of design is an act of co-imagining the future. Uday, very well said. In deference to consciousness as boundaries for imagining within Eastern cultures and Western cultures, this book of poems brings a pathway of convergence to what was very different in the 15th century, when Eastern culture's mindfulness centered on improving one's inner self, sometimes through meditation, to become a better person and a better life, as well demonstrated by the noted Japanese tea master, Ryalie, in the 15th century. And during the same time, on the other side of the globe, Leonardo da Vinci, known as the Renaissance man of the century, represents Western culture focusing on external physical artifacts to improve their way of life, such as painting, his Mona Lisa, inventing concepts for flying machines, architecture, military armaments. Flow of Uday's book today converges and integrates both cultures into a multipath with recognition of values from each. Uday closes his book with an appropriate Albert Einstein quote: "Imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited to all we know and understand, while imagination embraces the entire world and all there ever will be to know and understand." Congratulations, Uday, for publishing this message, and thank you from your colleague and friend, energized by a lifetime of imagination and consciousness. Thank you.
Thank you, Deane.
Thank you, Deane. That was lovely to hear some wonderful selections from Baba's book. Now I have the pleasure of introducing Professor Narendra Dengle, an architect, author, artist, and educator based in Pune. His projects over the last 5 decades have been executed in tribal, rural, and urban centers in India. He is faculty and chair of the Asian Advisory Board, Building Beauty Program at Sorrento, Italy, and director of the Building Beauty India. Professor Dengle, can I please ask you to unmute?
At the outset, congratulations to the poet and the designer, Uday Dandavate, and also his editor, Molly Pearson, and the duo that designed the book, Haw, that is the pronunciation I recently learned, Haw, and Savannah. So congratulations to all of you. The book has been dedicated to Professor Vasanta Bapat, whom I also had the privilege to know from the childhood. And Professor Bapat had a command, a rare command on Marathi as well as Sanskrit. So his language, his words, experimented with manifold meaning of the words wonderfully. Both consciousness and imaginations are much loaded terms. The struggle to unfold the splendor of their meaning for mankind has been going on relentlessly by scientists, philosophers, mystics, saints, enlightened beings, and artists in all cultures. Here is what Ian McGilchrist, in his 2-volume work, Matter of Things, says, and I quote, "Consciousness is real. The matter is secondary to consciousness, not the other way around. We can use various senses, intelligence, to make a picture of the world. We cannot dispense with the practice of either of the 4. And he says, science, reason, intuition, and imagination are indispensable. Uday has sought to pursue some of these wonderfully mysterious terrain in his book. For a reader, it's an excursion into a cave, like a Tom Sawyer's cave. And in search of a hidden treasure, one encounters tunnels winding off in different directions. Some show the promise of light. The others continue to allure you into darkness, dodge you, and play with you. So there is a designer in Uday that we see. The titles hint at being physical as well as metaphysical in their meanings. All make us think harder on creativity, individuality, universality, morality, purpose, freedom, and their interconnectedness. Many of these show a complete or gradual overlap. This labyrinthine excursion would continue until the realization that the treasure might actually be found within one's own inner self. This being only the known directly from there. The poems are presented under three clusters of roots, soul, and sky. Once the root is known, the emerging form, the shoot, is also known to some extent, and it won't surprise us. Gilles Deleuze suggests rhizome, whose manifest form remains unpredictable to some extent. Souls have been thought of curiously in various different ways, whether it carries the burden of the manifest life or not, or whether it reincarnates in a new avatar, or whether it extinguishes with the body itself. Uday uses these terms and seeks to know the deeper consciousness with the soul for its managing and meaning for the smaller self. That is the designer, and is completely aware of that. The poet wants to fly freely, but with the roots assuring a safe flight. He is hopeful that his personal musings may be found useful in healing, and that's a very important message. And expanding consciousness, it's almost like the universe is expanding, moving, and everything in the universe being conscious. And Uday seeks to know the deeper connections with the soul for its meaning for the smaller self, the science on which our civilization has evolved in the last 200 years or so, theorizing that the universe is finite and machine-like, has therefore to be completely discarded, necessitating a drastic shift in our perception of it. Can one be prepared for the future, which is the unknown? Uday believes that the future is possible to be reimagined, but needs to be from a shared imagination of it. So we need to be rid of the fear of the unknown, as J. Krishnamurti would say, by facing it and going beyond, and not by avoiding it. Indian philosophy has two terms to show the distinction between consciousness and awareness. The former is Zaniv, or the phenomenal. Zaniv is the phenomenal. And the latter is Neniv, which is the noumenal. The former deals with the phenomenal, the latter with the noumenal, which can paradoxically be witnessed by the living self. The witnessing, Uday has rightly said, cannot be logically judged. There can be no proof of it except by actually witnessing it. The boundaries. In his poem of Boundaries, the notion of the collective freedom is explored. Life happens through interconnectedness. Nothing at all works individually, and hence the realization may appear to be a hard process. He says that the mindfulness can align our feelings for all. So his poems oscillate, as it were, between the joys, sorrows, hardships, injustices in society, and this is on the one hand, while on the other, a freedom from all burdens and a deep thirst for creative spirit. In emptiness, one sees a kind of a void. But even the black holes are supposed to be churning out energy of another kind. Memories and morphic fields are always accessible for the entire human race, but with awareness. It is only a tiny fraction that comes to us from our genes. The rest one acquires from the morphic resonance. The Mahayana calls it the Alay Vidyan, which is the ocean of the unknown, ocean of the unconscious. Consciousness and imagination are perhaps the points on the spiral of the Vyakti, Vyakta, and Avyakta, the personal, the manifest, and the unmanifest, as the sage, the contemporary sage Nisargadatta Maharaj would say. I hope that the poems are read for the layers of meaning within them by many who are interested what creativity actually means. Thank you, Uday, for inviting me, and all the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Dengle. Now I am pleased to introduce Surya Vanka, a designer, author, and educator. He served as Director of User Experience at Microsoft, a tenured professor of design at the University of Illinois, and a fellow at the prestigious Center for Advanced Study. He's also a creator of Design Swarms, an agile design approach that has been used to tackle challenges worldwide. Surya, can I please invite you to unmute?
I'm here. Thank you so much. Uday, thanks so much for inviting me to this wonderful occasion and to share a few reflections. I have just been loving listening to Deane's and Professor Dengle's profound insights. My thoughts will be a bit more personal as they connect to your book and to you. So I've known Uday for more than 30 years. I knew Uday at the National Institute of Design at Ahmedabad as a fellow student in design, one who was just a few years my senior. Then I knew him as a fellow designer in Indian industry, still early in his maturity then. Later, we both coincidentally found ourselves at the Ohio State University for graduate school and even studied under the same teachers. Later, as designers practicing in the United States, we crossed paths professionally at Microsoft and in design communities where we shared our shared interests in design research, co-creation, and teaching. We collaborated on projects of working both in our adopted home of the United States and the country we grew up, India. Through all of these years, there have been some qualities that I've come to know and admire about Uday. And all of these qualities shine through in the book. The first one is Uday's boundless curiosity for how the world functions and how people think. As we know, he's been running a business, Sonic Rim, that focuses his curiosity on understanding how other people think. Now I see him turn his curiosity inwards to try to discover how he himself thinks. I think this is a book of self-exploration, and the poems in this book are, in fact, poems that point to himself. Some of these are keen observations, others are hypotheses, yet others are probes that one might use in design research. Some are mini ethnographies of aspects of himself. In many ways, this book is a self-portrait in 4 acts and in many poems. And I quote from the book: "While studying people, cultures, and social imageries from around the world, I developed a keen interest in the common traits that unite all humans. This interest has led me to recognize 2 human capacities: imagination and consciousness." As I read these poems, some of them are about design, some of them are about the world, and all of them are about Uday's own imagination and consciousness. Another quality that I know and admire in Uday is his willingness to be a bit of a pioneer. and to take the untrodden path. He's done this several times in his career as a designer, and I think he's being a pioneer again in exploring design and the world through poetry. If one squints, it's not so surprising, really, the symmetry between design and poetry. Design has a way of distilling immense amount of complexity into one seemingly simple form. Poetry functions the same way. Instead of describing an idea in thousands of words, hundreds of pages, a poem distills that into a few lines without losing their sense. The power of design to elegantly distill and compress is the same as poetry. As I read Uday's poem, each of them feels like well-architected poetic code. I think of Uday as someone who's been an avid traveler for the past several years, moving across the physical world, moving across cultures, as he's conducting research and connecting the dots and investigations as using proven design methods, logical proven design methods. In this book, I enjoy seeing how Uday is continuing to make the connections, continue to connect the dots, but through intuitive and poetic leaps. I quote, "I rely on my intuition to connect the dots." I think your intuition is serving you well, Uday. So Uday, I have known you for more than 30 years now and watched you go through many different explorations. I think this is your most interesting exploration yet, of imagination and consciousness of the world and yourself. Congratulations to you and to the team behind the book. Wishing you great success.
Thank you so much, Surya. This was such an interesting interpretation of poetry as design practice. I'm excited to share that now we have Tim Parsey with us, and he will be our next speaker. Tim's long career in design started with designing bobsleds for the US Olympic team, followed by roles at IDEO, Apple, ACCO, Motorola, Mattel, Xbox, Yahoo, and JP Morgan Chase. He now mentors individuals and advises startups. Tim, welcome. May I please invite you to unmute and share your thoughts with us?
Hi, yes. Hello, everybody. I understand we have a great collection of people around the world. I'm so honored to be part of this. I've known and loved Uday for many years, even a few decades now, perhaps like many others, and have always enjoyed his insights and his magic. In many ways, I've really enjoyed the fact that he has been on this journey of understanding people and understanding people in the context of culture, mostly business culture. And I've always looked up to him in the ways that he has explored people in his life in that way. In fact, when I think about his business of creativity and culture, I find it so fascinating because it really maps onto the title of this book, in the idea of consciousness and imagination. It's all about, culture and creativity. It's all about what he's been about for so long. And yet it never occurred to me until he wrote the book that that's what it was about. So I found it so inspiring to start to think about what this book was and start to dive in and absorb through poems. Poems to me and the topics that he talked about felt so brave. It felt so brave to share his vulnerabilities and his insights during COVID. And I felt, as I absorbed and went deep, I felt I was learning Uday on a most personal and deep side. Perhaps that's true for everybody who's read it so far. And I thought that was such a fascinating way to teach, which is, I think, what Uday has done most of his life, is to teach and enable consciousness and creativity in this way. I learned many detailed ideas in going through the poems, and I don't think I could recite any one of them, because each poem I had to read many times. In fact, some sentences I'd read again and again and again, because every time I read it, I went, oh yeah, but it could mean this, and then it could mean that. And it was a great provocation. I've actually made it about 2/3 of the way through, but that's not because I haven't spent many hours reading this book. So don't take it the wrong way. It's very, very deep and very powerful. I think what's so fascinating to me, though, is this idea of really understanding consciousness and creativity in a fresher way. And I map it to my own journey right now of one where I believe I'm transitioning from a world or a life of doing to a life of being. Of course, it's neither just one or the other, but in journeying to a life of being, I think I'm learning perhaps for the first time how to exist and see life in a way that I kind of put on the shelf while I was doing my big corporate career. And so it was very fascinating in reading the book because I felt that I could read it through both lenses. I could read the book as a series of insights and provocations on how to consider how to be more conscious and more creative in a business setting. For instance, when I think of successful people that have really made change and change that has lasted in businesses, I always think of them as people who are profoundly conscious, not just of a creative challenge or the local team around them or the customers they need to use, but they're conscious of the politics, of the permission that they've been granted, of the negatives and positives of the broader context of the business and the industry. And therefore, I think about in that doing state, the provocation that Uday is putting forward to be more conscious in this state maps to many experiences that perhaps we all have had of those enlightened people that make change in a profound way in business states. And likewise with imagination and creativity, I think it's the same kind of thing. If you think of imagination as just being about, oh, I've got a problem to solve. Oh, if only I could figure that button. That's true, but a button in the context of a product and a product line and a brand, and a culture and a business culture and a company culture. And then it's in the context of all of the other things that we've talked about that might be the way that the users interact with that. So just in general, I think the topics of consciousness and imagination have been well stated as provocations in that doing world. But then in the being world, the notion of being present, being able to listen deeply, being able to appreciate the small, tiny things in life, being able to think about your past parents who have passed in a way that maybe you couldn't have while they were around, but you are most able to do that after you've spent years pondering them after they've died. These are very personal and deep comments on being in a deeper way. And I think in that way, the other lens that I've attempted to understand Uday's book through, the world of how these provocations to the world of being, I think are as potent and as powerful. So I want to thank Uday for his generous and personal contribution to all of us. And I wish us all the capacities we have to understand the book on the depth that it has the capacity to influence. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tim. That was beautiful. You highlighted how poetry invites us all to reflect on our own stories and continuously re-examine the words on the page through the lenses of doing and being. That was beautiful. Next, we'll hear from Behroze Gandhi, a documentary filmmaker from the UK. She has created several films, most recently one entitled Keki Manzil, House of Art, in which she documents the story of her parents, Keku and Khorshad Gandhi, considered instrumental in the Mumbai progressive arts movement. I'll add a personal note that I've seen this film, and it was beautiful because of the way that she masterfully weaves her personal stories into the historical significance of her family's home and gallery. Behroze, welcome. May I please invite you to unmute and share your thoughts with us?
Thank you, Isha. Thank you, Uday, for inviting me. I feel a bit overwhelmed and overawed, and I thought hard about accepting this because I didn't know much about the subject, especially not poetry, because for me, poetry is something so perfectly crafted, so elusive, exquisite, And it's not something factual, which I'm used to dealing with and, getting your teeth into. But then the title was so bewitching, Imagination and Consciousness, that it felt like a challenge which was thrown out to anybody who's interested and curious with the arts. So what I'd like to do a lot is to read some of your poems, and say why certain things touched me. So it'll be a different. So it was a leap of faith, well justified the moment I received the file. And what was startling was that it resonated so immediately, as if someone had lavished some balm or honey over my chattering mind, giving it rhythm and cadence, soothing the recurring loops of thought that kept repeating themselves endlessly. I put it down initially to our shared experience of being migrants, coming from a homeland that nestles firmly within us, but although one has learned to operate comfortably in the external alien environment, which is home. This assumption was further amplified by the first section called Roots. The words in the poem Paradox articulate that sensation perfectly. I have felt lost in a crowd, lonely in a group, low up high, insecure in power, and also confident, supported, fearless, and relentless when walking alone with a purpose. And even more so in the poem called Balance. Growing up means balancing where we want to go with where we came from. Growing up means supporting our dreams with our memories. And then the visceral connection to the material was sparked by an early poem called Emptiness. The day I lost my mom, I felt a hole in my heart that I did not want to heal. I deal with my grief with gratitude for the space she once occupied. The middle section, Soul, brought home vividly the fact that so many of our concerns, thoughts, and preoccupations during the pandemic were universal. The poem Duality expresses that dilemma we all felt. It's an abiding refrain I can't silence, which plays monotonously in my head. And yet when I hear the words placed so simply and eloquently, I can give myself a break. I miss the past because I got used to it. And yet I don't want the future to be what the past used to be. And another reminder that all these musings and cogitations are only possible because of the two worlds that coexisted in parallel lines. It's high time we think of those who we crush under us and leave behind because without them we would not be where we want to be. And then the poetic musings develop a quality which you can call musical or painterly, which have been beautifully expressed earlier in this piece entitled Who Am I? Paul Klee once said that a line is only a dot taking a walk. With that framing, I'm only a dot on the walk in a spiral of life. I'm part of a community with the purpose of spiraling regeneration. And I think that just encapsulated everything that that came together in poetry and design. What was most surprising as I made my way through all the poems traversing that territory was that it morphed from roots, soul to sky, where you think you could be lost in the realms of the mystical, but how one of the last poems, Audacity to Dream, brought you down to earth to be able to challenge all the really ugly fires that have been scorching the public realm with the rhetoric of words like invasion, which are like rallying calls for war that have been unleashed on the least powerful and most dispossessed tribe, the asylum seekers who are washed up on the shores in dinghies because all other safe routes have been closed in the United Kingdom where I reside. Words that stoke up rage in the hearts of people on both sides of the debate, to the point that no dialogue is possible and everything shuts down. If one could sprinkle these words, perhaps in the House of Commons. So I'd like to end with the poem, Audacity to Dream. I look at the sky, it has no borders, nor is the horizon a dead end for my dreams. The sky and the horizon are the starting points of my imagination. I want to free up my land from the boundaries of parochialism. I want to free the minds of my people to tap into the abundant inspiration for exploration of possibilities across borders and the horizon. We don't need guns, we need a brush with which to paint our dreams. We need the audacity to dream across borders. Thank you for that, Uday. That has really given me a hope through the impasse.
Thank you so much, Behroze, for highlighting some key poems and how they enable readers to let our minds wander and also to root us in the realities of our world. Now I welcome Sridhar Ryalie, the director of the graduate program in design at Rangsit University in Bangkok. He's currently doing his PhD, and his research interests are at the confluence of neuroscience, meditation, and creativity. Sridhar, can I please invite you to unmute and share your thoughts with us?
Hi, Isha. Hi, Uday. Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me for this book launch. And congratulations, Uday, for releasing your third book on design thinking for everyday people. So I've known Uday for close to about 2 decades now. And the first time I was a participant of a workshop he was doing in India. And he's my first guru who taught me design thinking. And then the last time was when we invited him to be a guest speaker at the Thailand Creative Design Center. So we've been in touch for quite some time. And recently, Uday emailed me asking what I was up to. So I told him I was teaching and also pursuing a degree, a doctoral study in trying to enhance creative capabilities of students. And I was specifically looking at meditation and potentially how it can enhance students' creative capabilities. So the seeds of my topic were sown by a student who came to us once and said, how do we come up with good ideas? And that seemed like a very naive question. And we gave her the usual answers, travel more, read books, and watch movies. And but deep inside, I somehow knew that there's something more to that. There's something more profound in the act of creativity than just consuming stuff. So when I started my PhD, I looked at what I was doing, my passions, my interests, and meditation came up as a powerful tool because I started reading a lot of scientific reports and researches. And I found that recent research in the last 10 years has found that meditation can enhance our brains in several ways, and it improves creativity, and definitely by extension design, right? And also was the challenges we faced as teachers educated in the Western model and trying to teach in the Eastern context. And that was quite interesting in the sense, pretty much most of our educational models are based out of Europe or America. And we learn there, we pick up ideas and notions and import it into Asia. And that's pretty much the context here in Thailand where I work, right? And when we start applying it, a lot of things don't work exactly as intended. For example, design thinking, first you need to know design, then you need to know how to think. Right? Those are very different the way they work here. So when we started teaching students, we realized that these models are not immediately applicable. There's something needs to be added or probably deleted or, adapted to the context. So meditation helped me in many ways. Meditating on these problems. I've been meditating for close to about 30 years now, on and off, not very serious. But then when I got into this PhD, I said, okay, let me use this and practice this every day as much as I can and reflect on everything that I'm doing, my teaching, my studies, whatever I learn, whatever I pick up, impressions that come to me, everything would be a kind of a journaling process. I go through, let's say I go through a very challenging situation in a day. I take that, meditate, reflect on that, and put it in a book. And now these journals became very powerful because a lot of things that we miss through the day, it's all captured in the book. So I kind of apply the same technique to reading Uday's poems. So the first time I skimmed through them, I took about 2 days, went from cover to cover. And then the second time I went through them slowly, marked some of the poems that resonated with me. And the third time, I sat back, read through the poem very slowly and carefully, right? And then closed my eyes and meditated on that. And whatever impressions that came to me on that particular day, I would write it down, right? And I would go back to the poem a few days later, I'd get different impressions out of the same poem because my context has changed, my day has changed, I've done something different, right? So these notes became very, very powerful. I mean, these books sort of work like a very powerful tool to extract these impressions and images which were kind of latent, hidden inside me, right? And they helped me put it out in the form of a book. And I read that book several times and I thought, wow, this is profound. I didn't know that all this is happening inside my mind and how I can use meditation to tap into these. So all the while I was doing a very passive kind of a meditation where ideas would come and then they disappear. But here I am, I'm capturing these ideas, thoughts, emotions, images, right? And then also meditating together on those. So I found Uday's poems to be really powerful, especially for me, and it helped me in many ways. It's been what, 2-3 weeks since I've been reading the poems, really profound. And I intend to use them in my classroom, pick some of them and perhaps use them with the students. And I think they'll be very powerful, right? Some of the poems that really resonated with me was, he talks about the illusion of truth and how dreams are perhaps more real than reality. That's something that never occurred to me. I mean, are dreams more real than reality? Because reality is happening in front of us. Our perception sense organs are feeding in this information, while a dream is constructed entirely by you. Perhaps, we don't know, right? Your brain is instructing these dreams, is picking bits and bobs from everywhere and creating a story or a movie in your mind. And I found that very insightful because our perceptions of everything outside us and help us navigate this world. So there are essentially 3 things here, 3 layers. It's me, our perceptions, and the world. And we can never know what the real truth is in this world because each one has their own filter through which we perceive things. So it's perhaps that's the main reason for all the dissonance and confusion happening in this world, because each one of us sees it very differently. So especially for an untrained mind, right? When I say untrained mind, a mind which has actively participated in the process of, let's say, use meditation or go through a set of poems which are very, very broad and you can interpret in any which way you want, right? And actively apply this process for a period of time, you acquire certain skills, certain tools, basically, which can be which basically trains you. That's what I mean by trained mind, right? A trained mind perhaps is in better control or is better able to interpret things in this world than a totally untrained mind. So that's where I found Uday's book very, very, very interesting. And he also talks in his poems, The Glowworms, he talks about how the cumulative effect of enlightened beings inspires imagination. So he's basically referring to us as a huge collective of people coming together. Collective consciousness is what he said in one of his emails. How it has a massive impact on humanity, and I think that's really interesting point of view. There are a lot of poems which I want to reflect on, and I've given this as an exercise. I'm going to do this for some time, perhaps about 2-3 months, and then go back to my notes and see what came out of this process. So thanks a lot, Uday, for these wonderful poems, and I seriously recommend all of you to try this. It's a very interesting process, and then you'll be amazed at how you see this world, and the poems are really powerful in a way to help you perceive this world. So congratulations, Uday, on offering this wonderful gift for all of us, and I will definitely use them in the classroom, and I would definitely use designers, insightful people to read, right? They understand what all this is about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sridhar, for sharing your perspectives on the role of meditation in the act of creativity. It was very interesting to hear about how you used and incorporated the poems in your meditation practice. Next, we'll hear from Saqib Rasool, who is joining us despite losing access to power in his home. Thank you so much for joining us. Saqib is an author, poet, and CEO of Conceivian, a transformative school for leaders and their teams. Starting his career at Microsoft, he later built several startups and founded a startup accelerator. Saqib, can I please invite you to unmute and share your thoughts with us?
First of all, what an honor and treat it is to be present among such remarkable people at this, what I consider a historical moment of my dear friend Uday Dandavati releasing an important book, Imagination and Consciousness. I met Uday not too long ago on the grounds of Carnegie Mellon in Mountain View, and what instantly inspired me was his extremely curious and profoundly generous nature. And as I read his book, I can see that it reflects and embodies who Uday Dandavati is, and I can see the gifts that mystery has sent us through this man. This book is a magical kind of treat. As soon as I started reading and diving into imagination and consciousness, it fully captivated and expanded both of them in me, my imagination and my consciousness. I am also inspired by Uday's acknowledgement of Professor Vasant Bapat, whose poetry inspired Uday and awakened a poet in him. That is an honorable thing to do. That is to honor our history. The appreciation of our history, I believe, is the appreciation of our humanity. And I believe that what we call imagination and consciousness are in themselves historical phenomena. That is the sum of our stories, like a long-running narrative. The worlds in which we are born and move into, or worlds that we leave behind or invent from ground up, are all invented in our shared narratives. Our stories form the space-time continuum in which we can have the possibility to imagine a different future. Our stories and poetry define what we think with, what we can perceive, and what we can imagine. Consciousness, then, is the network of our stories. Imagination, then, is the space of possibilities made available by those stories. But, you know, human beings can get stuck in old stories and worlds that are no longer working. We can get stuck in the consciousness that is common sense. The consciousness of common sense is a trap that leaves not much room for imagination. Now, any poet and writer worth their salt, especially open a new consciousness and invites a new imagination for a new and empowering future with their poems, like Uday has done. And they take us to where imagination does not want to go, being trapped in common sense. A poet breaks this trap by reminding us of our cares and concerns like a space-time travel guide. A poet opens new wormholes and invites us to explore new worlds. And whereas what consciousness really is remains and may remain a mystery, a poet like Uday dives into this mystery and brings us clues and maps that expand our consciousness and become a birthing ground for our greatest asset, which is our imagination. In this book, Uday does this job of opening new consciousness and imagination fantastically, inviting us to care and to go beyond our present limitations and excuses. So this book is like an invitation for us to imagine a new and just world and expand our consciousness. While reading the book, many of the poems inspired me, such as the Brave Hearts and starting with the question, and who am I? But I kept going back to the first poem, which is a brilliant invitation to reimagine a different future in the midst of pain and suffering. I want to read you the last few stanzas of this powerful poem. So this is from Preparing for the Future from Imagination and Consciousness. We can't be sure what the future has in store for us, but for sure, the future is open for reimagination. The future will emerge from a shared imagination that will evolve through a dialogue. We can help moderate the dialogue. We can help frame the dialogue by understanding the dreams and values that survived and evolved and the fallacies that failed. We can't predict the future, but we can be prepared for it. That is all. Thank you very much, Uday, for writing this gorgeous book, and what a treat it is to be present amongst you. Thank you very much. Much blessings.
Thank you so much, Saqib, for your very fun and inspiring words. And a big thank you to all of our guest speakers today. We heard many interpretations of Uday's poetry. Our speakers spoke to how his poems weave in Eastern and Western philosophies, how they bring perspectives to deeply personal experiences, and also how we can apply various lenses to this work to guide us in how we reflect, act, and engage with our world. We're running a little bit late, so I just want to let you know that coming up next, we're going to have a lightning round with the team who designed and edited this beautiful book, and then we'll end with one final speaker. So now I'd like to invite one of the first team members to speak, Molly Pearson, who edited this book. Molly, can I invite you to unmute?
Hello. Hi.
Hi.
So I just have a very brief thought about this book, and I was reflecting on some poetry written by Rumi, and he says, your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. And I find this book to be a calling to search for the barriers that I have built against imagination and consciousness. And it is an invitation for me to kind of strip away some of the judgments or criticisms or things that rub us and keep us from a life of being delightfully imaginative. And I'm so grateful that this book exists as a calling and an inspiration for me to seek for the barriers within myself that I've built against my imagination and consciousness. And I suspect we could all benefit from a little bit of that.
Thanks so much, Molly, for that beautiful insight. Next, we'll hear from Savannah, who co-designed this book. Savannah, could you please share some words with us?
Yeah, sorry. Hi, everybody. Thanks for the intro, and thank you everyone for being here to celebrate this huge accomplishment. I just want to speak to what a delightful experience it was being part of this whole process. Not only was it so fulfilling to be able to work on such meaningful content, but it was also just really beautiful being able to work alongside Uday and Jung and Molly. Uday was so open the whole time to whatever ideas that we had. And throughout the process, it really felt like a true shared collaboration that was really absent of ego or the need to control. Being able to create something beautiful together in such alignment and mutual trust is such a rare and beautiful experience. In my opinion, I think it's one of the closest things that we have to magic. Working on this book taught me a lot, and I'm deeply inspired by Uday's insight and vision. Uday's core values are creativity, compassion, and curiosity, but I also think that he really embodies another value, which is courage. Working on this project has grown my own courage in facing the creative process. It's taught me to be more diligent about not letting musings and feelings that may feel insignificant just slip by, but to have courage to grab onto them and take them seriously, because there's a lot more beauty and power in those notions than we give ourselves credit for. I recently read a quote answering what is poetry from a book titled How to Read a Book by Mortimer J. Adler and Charles Van Doren. And I'd like to share it with you today because I feel like it really describes Uday and much of the process that keeps in tradition of being a poet. Poetry is the kind of spontaneous overflowing of the personality, which may be expressed in written words, but may also take the form of physical action or more or less musical sound, or even just feeling. There is something to this, of course, and poets have always recognized it. It is a very old notion that the poet reaches deep down into himself to produce his poems, that their place of origin is the mysterious well of creation within the mind or the soul. In this sense of the term, poetry can be made by anyone at any time in a kind of solitary sensitivity session. I'm just really grateful that Uday was generous enough to take the time and effort to tap into his own well of creation and to bring us both the gift of being able to actualize this and the gift of the book itself that we're reading. I hope you really all enjoy reading his poems as much as I have. And while you do, I really hope that you feel the love and the joy and the thoughtfulness that went into every single page. I'd like to close by reading the last 3 stanzas of one of my favorite poems from it, Possibilities, which I hope will transfer the same inspiration that Uday experienced to all of you. I believe each of us has a light inside, like fireflies, bright enough to illuminate the sky. When we twinkle together, each of us has a fragrance. Together, we can fill the air with inspiration for caring, loving, and being creative. It's time to heal together, to believe in possibilities emerging from chance encounters, turning into a shared space for building a life full of wonder. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Savannah. And that was Savannah Kaur. Next, we'll hear from Jung Ho. Jung, I tried. I hope I didn't butcher the pronunciation.
No, you're all good. You're all good.
Jung co-designed and illustrated this book. Jung, can I invite you to share your thoughts?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And it's such an honor. And congratulations, Uday, on this amazing launch. Savannah's presentation is going to be a hard one to follow. Try my best. Yeah. So, you know, when I first was invited to collaborate on this project, I think for me it was such a tall task because I approached it as a design project, as a client to designer project. So, you know, God knows that it took a while for me to like really shed those barriers. And over time, I got to realize that Uday's request for this project wasn't about designing a book. It was about inviting my being, my soul into his journey. So when I finally realized that was the actual invite, I think that's when I started to move in a more like free and liberated manner. And I realized how much like locked away I was as a human and as a designer. So, the theme imagination and consciousness, to me, it means it's a portal to curiosity and ultimately collaboration. That's how I grew through this project. I got to go back to my roots, which is the childlike, genuine curiosity about design, life, people, network, how we all come together. And then collaboration. I grew personally from the projects by being able to let go and ask for help. So, Savannah really paved the way on that part of my self-growth, and she really came through and lent a hand that I really needed to, design the book. And the collaboration just really reminded me that, there's a lot of bad in the world, but I also recognize that we as species thrive, evolve through collaboration and serving others. And today's Zoom meeting reflects that and how Uday has lived his life. So it's such a true honor to be here, to be able to speak my mind for a little bit, and really great to meet all of you. Wish I could give you all like a hug right now. And again, special thanks to Uday, special thanks to Savannah, and cheers to all the collaborators and the brave hearts. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jung. Now I'm excited to introduce our closing speaker, Tom Hirsch, the head of In Search, the go-to recruiter for senior design leadership roles in the industry. Today, Tom serves as the CEO and Chief Growth Officer for Manchester, UK-based Graphene Innovations. Tom, can I please invite you to unmute and share your closing statements with us?
Thank you. I've come to think of a good relationship as an alignment of two trajectories of stories into a better story together. And when Uday and I first met, I think we both felt that we were kindred spirits. Actually, I think we discussed that very much and confirmed our stories, how they evolved over the years. Both of us were in search of really the poetry of life, though we wouldn't have had the language or the words to speak of it that in those days. I think when I think of those times when we first met, I smile because I couldn't not smile in Uday's presence. And to me, there was a sense of coming home, a sense of, when I say kindred spirit, both of us were on a journey around human engagement. Uday professionally, as it related to insights-driven innovation, and me in the context of human engagement at a deeper level with people that were at the fork in the road in their lives in important decision-making having to do with their life and their careers and what is appropriate next. And that to me felt like an honor and a privilege to engage people. And I took that seriously and I wanted to do it in an innovative way. And I'm going to go back for a moment to Uday, and then I'm going to share maybe some of the human engagement parallels that he and I think, share. The world is a dangerous, insane place, and Uday offers a safe oasis to explore choices for sanity, consciousness, and meaning. I find that Uday's poetic musings become an inclusive invitation to go on a journey of considerations that are gently encouraging mindful choice. And choice, to me, is almost a sacred word, because it's the context. If consciousness is the context, actually choice is what we decide within that context. Uday has a poem where he beautifully describes our rush to interpret things the way it often is, in terms of interpreting value or acquiring things, and mistakenly equating that with joy, and invites us to have a conscious choice of the richness of experiences in nature, for example, that we cannot control or own, and bringing joy through experiencing rain, rainbows, sun, trees, nature. And that engagement is where real richness comes, real value comes. And Uday reminds us and gives us perspective and choice in where we derive meaning and value in our lives. And he also, in terms of the inclusiveness and co-creation theme, he said, the act of design is an act of co-imagining the future. And co-creation and co-imagining is a part of everything that Uday has done professionally, and then brings it into poetry and brings it into a larger frame of the inside experience of that. One of the precious, some of you know that I've focused for years in my search practice purely with designers, user experience. And one of the precious qualities about designers and poets is that they see the world as it could be, not just as it is. And that, to me, had a sense of magic and was inspiring. And that's what drew me into the world of design for 30 years, because it aligns with how I see the world. In fact, I had an epiphany many years ago. I used to, like a lot of people who are sensitive, I used to feel like I was at the effect of the meaninglessness of the world. I could only see the meaninglessness sometimes, and it was bleak, and I felt that the effect of it. And then I had this epiphany, which was, if the world, in fact, as I experience it, is meaningless, I may not experience meaning if I don't create meaning. So I was spring-loaded with that insight, and realized that it's my life path and it's important to me to create meaning wherever I go. And I created In Search, the name of my search practice, which had an obviousness in search. That's what I do, right? The name came to me, however, in a hypnagogic state as I was about to fall asleep, which at the time I actually thought of as a cosmic joke, because of course people would think the name In Search describes what I do. But I thought of it as who I am being expressed within what I do. And my definition of a fit became the who you are being expressed within what you do, and became a launch pad for my process, which was contrary. And here's where, again, innovation can come in anywhere in life. Most search firms, most experiences in our culture are what I think of as transactional. And I wanted to create a relational context where I would discover a fit, not sell a fit. And then I would put my searches aside initially and create the space for someone to be understood the way they would like to be understood, because there aren't very many places in our culture for pure understanding. It's just not there. It's very transactional. And I made it my mission also to create a safe space for people to feel understood the way they needed to be understood. We walk around thinking that we have shared reality. We actually have separate constructed realities that we mistakenly think are shared by everybody. So we don't translate, we don't engage, we don't communicate in a way that really honors and respects each other's differences. And it became, in my process, a discipline to practice like a martial art or yoga, to start with a blank slate. What a privilege, what an honor. I'm in Denmark right now. My wife and I live in both Denmark and a small town of Aspen, Colorado, in the mountains of Colorado. And in Aspen particularly, you can walk down the street and people, quote, know you. They say hello, you say hello. My exploration was, what does it really mean to know someone? Which is a fascinating journey, because we live in a sea of physicality where we see people sometimes regularly, but we don't know them. But meeting people on the phone in those days, not Zoom, and going through processes and creating processes where they felt known became a fascinating journey for me, and became, as I say, a practice. So Uday's writings and Uday's previous exploration and human engagement was very similar to this fascination with what does it mean to understand, to translate, to find meaning, to engage people meaningfully, to connect. And Uday's writings are, I think, a gentle nudge to the reader to connect meaningfully within themselves, with others, and within nature, and to explore their own place within all of that, and to make choices that are appropriate and evolve what are the consequences of those choices. What is the meaning of those choices? And that, to me, is what consciousness is all about, to create the choice to be conscious, to create the choice to engage meaningfully and mindfully. I know that Uday is taking pause and having time to reflect and consider what's next for him, as if this is his third act. But I actually think that this is re-engaging Uday with his original spiritual gift and, quote, act. This is who he is being revealed. So I say thank you and congratulations, Uday, on your book. And I appreciate being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom, for those lovely closing words. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you to our guest speakers who shared their reflections. And thank you for the team who contributed to the creation of this book. And finally, thank you so much to Uday Baba for bringing us here together today to share our reflections and our thoughts. You've provoked a lot of reflections through your wonderful writings, and you've created a body of work that has inspired so many people. I will pass it to you to close this book launch.
Thank you very much, everyone. It was an amazing experience just listening to everyone. I'm glad I decided not to talk, but to listen. Thank you all speakers, all the attendees, and I know it's very late for some of you. Have a good bye, and please stay in touch. Please share your experiences. The book is available on Amazon right now in hardbound, paperback, and Kindle version. In India, it's only available in Kindle version. So go ahead, read it, and please write your reviews on Amazon, reader reviews. Bye-bye and good night.
Bye-bye.